Hi, and welcome back to another chapter of Small as an Elephant by Jennifer Richard Jacobson. We are on chapter 6 in this video, and chapter 5 ended with Jack destroying his tent and hiding it in the woods as he takes off what we can assume to be to search for his mom. And he told Aiden that he would hang out with him, and Aiden's mom was going to bring him soup for his mom, who he was claiming was not feeling well. And so at the end of the chapter, we see that Jack has just left the campsite and hasn't told anybody where he's going. So chapter 6. Did you miss your stop? The driver asked when Jack had reached the end of the bus line. He'd been riding the bus for almost an hour. The island was much bigger than he'd imagined, and he realized that searching for his mother would be harder, a lot harder than he thought. Each time the bus stopped at a dock or lake or town, he wondered if this was the place where he should look first. But the bus always moved on before he made a decision. Son, what to do? Suddenly, he felt so tired. And now, here he was in Bar Harbor, a town that had been on their list for all its fun shops and restaurants. A town that may or may not hold his mother. I have to start my search somewhere, he figured, and got off the bus. Standing in the village green, he realized that searching was not a plan. You couldn't just walk around a big island hoping to find someone. He needed to do this logically. The sun was setting, and while he could search some of the shops and restaurants, he knew he had to be realistic. And being realistic meant finding a place to sleep while there was still some light left. Obviously, he'd have to camp, not at a campground which costs money, but in the woods. He'd seen plenty of woods on the bus ride in. With one last look at the bustling streets, Jack turned and walked back out of town. He walked for about 10 minutes down Mount Desert Street, where he passed a stone church, a graveyard, and lots of unmarked graves. Or so the sign said, and the town library on Kibo Street. On Kibo, he ducked into a patch of woods. Right away, he found a mossy area on the roots of a tree, a soft place for sleeping that was far enough from the road that no one would notice him, but not so far in that he would get lost. He unrolled his dark green sleeping bag and crawled in. Mom said they might sleep under the stars one night, and now he was doing it. See, checking 2 things off the list. He tried to come up with a plan. Maybe he could get a map of the town and comb all the streets. He could ask people who worked in the galleries and restaurants and shops if they'd seen her, or at the grocery stores. Chances were she'd stop for something. Thinking about Mom and the next steps made his brain hurt. So he let his heavy eyes shut, let snatches of dreams about winding roads, pine trees, anchors, and telescopes turn his mind inside out, grab hold of him and pull him down, down, down. Sleep had become his only way out of worry. But not for long. A noise woke him, a snuffling noise, rustling. It took him a moment for him to remember that he was not in his tent, but out on his own in the woods. And there was someone or something in the dark, nearby. Did other people camp in the woods? Homeless people, maybe? Jack's breathing slowed. At times, stopped. Altogether. Buried in his sleeping bag, He didn't dare pop his head out. He wished, oh how he wished, he had his tent to act as a barrier. He thought of rolling over and flattening himself against the ground. It seemed as if he would be less vulnerable, more capable of springing up and running in that position. But he couldn't risk being heard. Whatever it was made a clicking noise followed by a low rumbling, and Jack thought he'd die of a heart attack before he was discovered. Should he continue to play dead, or should he run? If it was a man or a bear, it was likely he'd be chased. He remained frozen. It was coming closer. Definitely closer. If it was an animal, and from the snorting sounds Jack was now pretty certain it was, it no doubt smelled him. What could be in these woods? Bear? Moose? Coyote? Jack didn't think a moose would intentionally hurt a boy, at least not one stretched out on the ground. But he was definitely less certain about bears and coyotes. Or wolves. He'd forgotten about wolves. His flashlight was in his backpack. What would happen if he shone a light in the eyes of the wild animal? Would light frighten it away? Anger it? Jack supposed it would depend on the type of animal. He uncurled his fingers, testing their ability to reach for his backpack, to grasp. Why hadn't he thought to tuck the flashlight into his sleeping bag with him? Scooting up in the sleeping bag in slow, carefully measured increments, Jack reached for his backpack, reaching out, stretching his whole arm. But just as his fingers grazed the fabric of the strap, the backpack jerked away. Robbed. He was being robbed! Whatever it was knew he was here on the ground. Had he been seen going into the woods? They knew he had a backpack, knew it, and wanted it. Dang it, he'd already lost a mother and a phone. He couldn't afford to lose anything else. He sat up and yelled, "Hey!" Yelled at the thief, yelled at the raccoons who had confiscated his cheese, leaving his backpack on the ground, and were now scrambling away in the bright moonlight. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. It wasn't a man or a bear, just some silly raccoons. But his cheese, his last bit of food. He could have sworn his stomach growled in protest, growled at the thought of not eating again, of having no food and too little money to purchase more. And that is the end of our chapter. I hope I see you guys again tomorrow for another chapter from Small as an Elephant. Until then,